Every 4th of July for 6 years, my mother-in-law stood on the dock of her $2 million lake house and reminded me in one polite sentence or another that I would never truly belong there. This year, a sheriff's deputy walked down that same dock holding a foreclosure notice with my name printed on it, not as a Whitmore, but as the person now holding the debt on the house itself. If you've ever been made to feel like a permanent guest in a place you had every reason to feel at home, hit subscribe because this story has a turn even I didn't see coming while it was happening to me. Comment below and tell me the specific phrase someone's used to make you feel like an outsider in your own family. I read every single one. Here's how we got to that dock. My name is Naomi Ford. I'm 35, and I work as a title examiner for a regional real estate investment fund, the kind of quiet, detail-obsessed job that involves untangling property records, liens, and mortgage histories most people never think about until something goes wrong. I married Caleb Whitmore 7 years ago, and from our first Thanksgiving together, his mother Diane made her opinion of me clear without ever quite saying it directly. Diane and Robert Whitmore's lake house, a sprawling 3-story property on Fenwick Lake that had been in the family for 2 generations, wasn't just a vacation home to them. It was the physical proof of everything they believed they'd built and everything they believed I hadn't. The pattern started small and never really stopped. My first summer there, Diane assigned seating at the long dock table by family branch, cousins and their spouses clustered by bloodline, and I was placed, quietly, at the far end, near the door to the boathouse, a seat Caleb didn't seem to notice, but I never once forgot. The Whitmores have owned this shoreline since 1974, Diane liked to remind guests, usually while looking directly at me as though the fact itself were a boundary line she expected me to respect. When Caleb and I got engaged, Diane's first comment wasn't congratulations, it was, "I do hope you understand what a family like ours actually values, dear. Roots, continuity, things that take generations to build properly." Every year after that, some version of the same sentiment resurfaced, usually softened into something that sounded almost like a compliment. "You'll get there eventually," she told me once, at year 3, watching me help clear the dinner plates while her actual daughters-in-law, married into families she approved of, sat and talked. Not everyone starts out belonging here. Some of us just have to work harder to earn it. I never fully understood for most of those 7 years that earning it was a door that had never actually been designed to open. What I did know professionally in the background of my own unrelated work was that Robert Whitmore, Caleb's father, had spent much of the past decade making increasingly aggressive real estate investments outside the family's core wealth, using the lake house repeatedly as loan collateral to fund each new venture. I knew this the way you know background facts about family members you're not particularly close to, without connecting it at first to anything that would ever matter to me directly. This year's 4th of July gathering fell on a Saturday. 60-some guests spread across the lawn and the long dock, the same performance of effortless old money ease I'd watched Diane orchestrate for 7 summers running. Around sunset, standing near the boathouse with a group of Diane's friends, I overheard her mid-conversation, her voice carrying easily across the water the way voices do at that hour. "Caleb's wife works in real estate," she was saying, in the particular tone she used when she wanted to sound generous while being anything but. Title research, I believe, not the glamorous side of it, but she tries. One of her friends asked, kindly enough, whether I'd ever feel truly at home in a family with this much history behind it. Diane didn't hesitate. "Some people just don't come from places like this," she said, smiling the smile she always used for cruelty dressed as candor. "I love her for Caleb's sake, but she'll never quite belong here, not really. You can't manufacture roots." I'd heard variations of that sentence for 7 years, this time standing at the edge of the dock with a glass of lemonade going warm in my hand, something in me finally, quietly, stopped absorbing it as background noise. I didn't say anything that evening. I finished the party, drove home with Caleb, and said nothing about what I'd overheard, mostly because I needed time to sit with a realization that had been building for longer than that one comment. The following Monday, back at work, reviewing an unrelated portfolio of distressed notes our fund had recently acquired from a regional bank, a familiar address caught my eye halfway down a spreadsheet of properties in loan default: 412 Fenwick Lake Road. I sat with that for a long moment before pulling the full file. 18 months earlier, Robert Whitmore had taken out a substantial private loan against the lake house to fund a commercial development that had since collapsed, defaulting on 2 consecutive payments before the original lender sold the distressed note in a bundled portfolio to the very fund I worked for, months before I'd ever have reason to notice it buried in someone else's caseload. Robert Whitmore, it turned out, was roughly 4 months from foreclosure on the house his wife had spent 7 years using as proof that some families simply belonged and others didn't. I could have stayed quiet about my discovery entirely, let the foreclosure process run its normal course through the fund's standard channels, handled by colleagues who had no idea the debtor was my own father-in-law. Some part of me honestly considered doing exactly that. But I'd spent my career valuing precision and fairness over cruelty, even toward people who'd shown me very little of either, and I found myself instead requesting a formal case reassignment, disclosing the family conflict of interest to my supervisor, and asking to personally oversee the file, specifically because I wanted the process to be handled correctly, transparently, and without the kind of quiet institutional cruelty that foreclosure proceedings so often carry when nobody involved knows or cares about the human details underneath the paperwork. The formal notice of default and impending foreclosure sale was served 3 weeks later, delivered by a county sheriff's deputy to the Whitmore residence, exactly as required by law for a property of that value. I wasn't present when it arrived. I found out because Caleb called me at work, his voice tight and confused, describing a deputy standing on his parents' dock with a folder of documents, and his mother, for the first time in the 7 years he'd known her to describe her, completely unable to form a coherent sentence. "There's a name on the paperwork, Naomi, as the beneficiary of the note. It's yours." I drove out that evening and found Diane sitting at the same long dock table where I'd been seated at the far end for 7 consecutive summers, the foreclosure documents spread in front of her, my name listed clearly as the fund representative, and, per my formal request weeks earlier, as the direct point of contact for any forbearance or resolution discussion. "I need you to understand something," I said, sitting down across from her in the seat I'd never once been offered in 7 years. "I found this file by accident doing my actual job. I could have let it proceed through normal channels with someone who has no idea who any of you are. I asked to handle it myself instead because, despite everything, I didn't want this handled by a stranger who wouldn't understand what this house actually means to your family." Diane's face moved through something I'd genuinely never seen from her before. Not anger, exactly, but a kind of stripped-down uncertainty, the specific vulnerability of someone whose entire sense of standing had just been quietly repositioned. "You could foreclose," she said, more statement than question. "I could," I agreed. "The fund has every legal right to, given the default history. But I'm not interested in taking this house from your family, Diane. I'm interested in you finally understanding that the person you've spent 7 summers telling she'll never truly belong here is the same person currently deciding whether your family keeps it at all." I laid out calmly the actual options available: a structured forbearance plan, a restructured repayment schedule, terms I was fully authorized to offer any similarly situated borrower, terms that had nothing to do with mercy and everything to do with standard fund policy for distressed accounts with viable repayment paths. Robert, arriving partway through the conversation, sat down heavily, looking, for the first time in the years I'd known him, genuinely smaller than the house around him. 7 years, he said quietly, mostly to himself. "We spent 7 years making her feel like an outsider in a house she just quietly kept us from losing." I approved the forbearance plan the following week, through proper channels with full documentation, exactly as I would for any other borrower in a similar situation. The Whitmores kept the lake house. Diane hasn't repeated the phrase, "You'll never belong here," since that afternoon on the dock, not once in the years since that afternoon. She's not warm toward me now, not in any dramatic, transformed way, but at last year's 4th of July, for the first time in 7 summers, she seated me at the main table, without comment, without ceremony, simply setting a place beside Caleb the way she should have from the beginning. Robert, to his credit, has been the more visibly changed of the two. He asks me now genuinely about my work, about the fund, about decisions I make professionally, questions with none of the old condescension behind them. "You had every reason to let that foreclosure run its course," he told me once, quietly, at a smaller family dinner. I think about that more than I probably let on. I think about that doc often, the 7 summers I spent at the far end of the table, absorbing a sentence I'd stopped even registering as cruel, because I'd heard it so many times. I didn't save that house to prove I belonged there. I saved it because it was the right thing to do, and because some part of me had already decided long before that Monday morning spreadsheet that I wasn't interested in becoming the kind of person who mistakes power for an excuse to be unkind. Has someone ever made you feel like a permanent